California has got one heck of a problem, and Californians are only beginning to wake up to that reality now. How should they be thinking?
Good morning. Well, they're waking up slowly, and that's part of the mistake. How should they be thinking? There are two things. We're in year 4 of the drought just in California. This drought might last 2 more years or 6 more years. It could last a decade. You could literally have 6th and 7th graders with no memory of real rainstorms. So part one is you need to figure out how to make it through the next few years, the short term, how to keep business growing and thriving. California's economy has come back. How to keep the farms working. Half the produce in the United States comes from California. But I think much more important, California needs to reinvent its water system, which is incredibly elaborate and complex, to account for this kind of dryness. The system that exists doesn't work very well, and they need a long-term reimagination, and then they need to teach the rest of us what they learned about how to manage scarce water.
Where are they going to get the money to do this? If Californians are only waking up now to realize this is an issue, clearly budgets and laws have not yet been passed to afford to do some sort of revamp, like you're saying.
Well, I'm not sure money is the most important thing. It doesn't cost any money to take a shorter shower. A third of the water utilities supply in California, that's different from the agricultural water, of course, a third of the water utility supply goes to lawn watering. So it doesn't cost any money to stop watering your lawn. It does cost money to substitute better landscaping in the short term. But the truth is, Stephanie, it costs a lot of money to find new water for California. And so what you really need to do is say, how do we make the water we've got economically productive and as economically productive as possible?
So, Charles, why not just put a price on it? Why not allocate an amount of water, a minimum amount of water that every Californian needs to survive, and of course take the odd shower, but not car washing, for example, and not necessarily watering your lawn, and just charge Californians for everything they consume over and above that minimum?
Well, that system kind of exists for the utility water people. The issue is that 60 or 70% of the water in California goes to farms. And there's a very complicated 100-year-old system for who gets that water, whether they pay, how much they pay. And when I talk about reinventing the system, that's what I'm talking about, and how you share water.
No, I meant charge everybody for it, not just the folks in Santa Cruz or in out in Palm Springs. Right. Of course, most of the water gets consumed by agriculture, but I've seen many arguments, and you would know better than me whether they're accurate, that the agricultural consumers aren't paying, in many cases, a fair market price for that water, or what should be a fair market price.
They aren't. And of course, if they start paying more, we'll start paying more for our fruits and vegetables. But what happens if you charge for water is people find ways of saving it. It's largely free. And so I'm a big fan of bringing some economics to water. The problem is that there are laws that entitle people to water. And so when I talk about reinventing the system, you have to start with a clean sheet of paper and then figure out who's going to be hurt and how you transition them. So you can't just wave a magic wand. What I think is interesting is that Jerry Brown, just reelected governor, at the height of his popularity as governor, and then you talk about the CEO of Disney, the CEO of Google, the CEO of Apple, Facebook, Twitter, some of the most prominent companies and some of the most prominent communications companies in the world, all headquartered in California. There's no conversation. There's no attention to the problem from those people. You know, when
I'm guessing they all
enter,
have swimming pools at their houses, just a guess.
Well, it's even more than that. When you press enter on a Google search, 2 tablespoons of water is used to do that Google search. Every time anybody...
Hold on. Walk us through that one more time. 2 tablespoons of water is used every time I hit enter in a Google search? How?
And even if you're using it on your iPhone and you just press go, yes. Because
that's pretty cool.
Google uses enormous quantities of water to run its server centers. Apple uses enormous quantities of water. Disney uses enormous quantities of water. Intel actually reports all of its water use around the world to make chips. And those people could step up and say to the governor, as could the large farm communities and irrigators, we need a conversation about how to fix the system. And they seem oblivious, which is sad.
Charles, before we run out of time, where would you have them look? Where in the world gets water right? What jurisdiction, municipality, country? Tell us.
The quickest place to look is Australia. Australia looks very much like California economically and climate-wise. Australia had a 10-year drought across the entire country, and they had to reinvent their water system. The economics of it, they cut the amount of water people at home used in half, and they reimagined just what you were talking about, Eric, the economics of how water is supplied to big users. And Australia has all kinds of lessons. Much closer to home, Las Vegas, the city of Las Vegas, has a lot to teach Sacramento, Los Angeles, San Diego, because Las Vegas lives with the amount of water that was allocated in 1935, and they're a little bigger than they were. So there's lots of lessons, even very close to home.
One quickly before we run, Charles. I've spoken to some farmers out in the Central Valley. They constantly point a finger at environmentalists and the smelt, for example, that lives in the Sacramento River drainage, and say that if the government didn't allocate so much water to the fish, we wouldn't have a problem. What do you say to those folks?
What I say to those folks is, if you've set up a water system that requires extinguishing a species to grow our broccoli and our strawberries, the system isn't right. In the short term, they may have a reasonable argument. In the long term, all that tells you is the system's broken. You're facing farmers off against the smelt. The truth is those farmers are pumping so hard out of the ground that in many places in California, the ground is falling an inch a month, a foot a year. So the system really needs reinvention, and rain, hoping for rain, is not a plan.